what I've realized is a lot of that is just iteration. You cannot be a great writer if you're not open to yourself fail in the process of writing. This is, I think, a sad truth. Indian male engineers, the demand for seats is really high. So 7-10, in my opinion, doesn't work. Apply in the early action programs at these schools. I think it really helps, in my opinion, to even for scholarships, it does help.
Welcome to another episode of Crack the MBA show. Our guest today is Giriraj Heda, who is a first-year student at University of Virginia's Darden School of Business. Giriraj holds a BTech degree in mechanical engineering from NIT Karnataka, where he was team captain for the racing team. Post-college, Giriraj worked as an operations engineer at ExxonMobil, where he led and supported oil and gas exploration projects off the coast of Cyprus, Guyana, and Russia. At Darden, Giriraj has been awarded the Allan and Barbara Staats Fellowship with an $80,000 award. Giriraj has been nominated as the International Student Rep for his section and has been selected as community consultant at Darden. This summer, Giriraj will be interning with McKinsey in their Houston office. Welcome, Giriraj. Thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you so much, Nipur. Really excited to be here and look forward to this podcast.
Awesome. Amazing. Let's get started. So, Giriraj, to begin, can you tell our audience a fun fact about yourself?
So, I think this is pretty funny. I think I can create really good first impressions. So, the first day I land in the US, my Uber driver offers me a co-foundership in his startup. He made me sign an NDA. This is the first time I'm taking a cab from DC to Charlottesville. And in that 1.5 hour of ride, he still keeps in touch with me. So I may actually end up becoming a co-founder with him someday.
Wow. So how's the startup going?
No, I actually didn't have time to work on it, but he's still pinging me. We're still interested. The idea, I have leads. Let's hold on. Darden has been. I think it was just funny. It was just wow, US, the first day. And this is what happens to me.
You're like, wow, I'm off to a good start already.
Yeah, this is the best. I don't end up with a job. I have something I can do.
Yeah, plan B. There you go. Super. Yeah. Amazing. All right. So with that wonderful fun fact, let's also talk a little bit about some influences you've had growing up, right? Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and the most important influences in your life?
Yeah, for sure. I grew up in Belgaum, which is a border city between Maharashtra and Karnataka. And growing up was really interesting because I'm a North Indian as such. I'm a Rajasthani, grew up in Belgaum. So I kind of, learned Kannada because it's a border state with Maharashtra. I can speak Marathi and at home I speak Marwari. So I end up actually speaking 5 languages over this, as I kind of grew up. And it was really interesting because I ended up being brought up in a very diverse environment. So that was really kind of something that made, I think, if I look back, that was one of my key drivers for me to be adaptable and able to engage with different audiences. And that was going out of your comfort zone very early on. So now this is a very first nature to me to just go out and mingle with anyone. And so I think that was pretty interesting. Very early on, I think in 11th grade and 12th grade, I kind of became hinged onto science. A big inspiration there was a Nobel laureate physicist called Richard Feynman. And I think I grew up reading a lot of his books. And in that, one of my biggest takeaway that I still carry with me is, everything in the world is interesting. Just be curious enough to explore. And I think curiosity is something I learned from Feynman. That has been a biggest driver throughout my learning journey, throughout my professional journey. Just being curious about anything. It helps you do your job better. It helps you be very present in any situation. And it helps you focus on the fundamentals. Rather than more tactical things, I now focus on why are we really doing this? And just having that innate curiosity was a big driver growing up. And I can see those effects kind of play out even here. So that's something very interesting, kind of, how some of those early interests and just hinging upon some of these inspirations has still kept in me a certain passion for learning.
That's very cool. And did the love for languages help you in college as well?
For sure. I think that's generally at least in the US, when you say, 5 languages, people are very curious. How did you end up learning 5 languages? So my aim is at least to pick another language over here. But
which one will it be? Spanish?
Spanish. I like it.
It'll be helpful for you in North America.
Yeah. There's a big Latin American community here and it's really fun to be able to speak in their language. So I would want to pick up on that.
Yeah, with your keen interest and as well as your ability to learn languages, I'm sure you'll be able to pick it very quickly.
I'm trying.
Also, where you talked about your love for learning and your ability to be present, I think all of those are wonderful traits, even when it comes to contributing in teams. So I'm sure your team members love you for that.
Yeah, that's very right. Like, and even at Darden, we have this learning teams, and I'm so glad to have a really fantastic learning team. We go very well, and I think some of those traits really help in that, like being able to connect. It's not just like directly proportional to your presence in the classroom, but I think even interpersonal skills kind of are elevated by that.
Very cool. Yeah, I love the learning team culture at Darden. And of course, we're going to talk about that a little bit
Oh,
later
yeah.
as
Yeah.
well. So I want to hear more about this.
Mhm.
Maybe one more thing that you could talk about when it comes to influences and the way you've shaped up, Giriraj, is can you share some of the winning habits that have led to all your successes in various areas? Because a lot of times we see that there are certain things that people are doing that eventually incrementally that build up to something meaningful.
So there are a bunch of things that, number one, at the very highest level, I would say is I would come back to that curiosity. And a lot of times we forget enjoying the process itself because we are so focused on like the outcomes and like controlling the outcome that we really forget about what that process means. And kind of getting deeper into this, for example, like a very closer example right now is the recruitment, in a B school. A lot of times you're so focused on like getting that particular internship or a job that the process becomes really a hard part. And I think it's really important to learn to enjoy a process. It can be grueling at times. That only can come when you're kind of understand why a certain process is designed the way it is. And you focus on developing yourself to adapt to that process. In a nutshell, like enjoy the learning, the process. That's one thing I think, and be curious in that entire journey that you have instead of being very tactical. Of course, you have to be tactical in your approach, but also understand the reason why you're doing something and just be curious to develop yourself in that way. That's something that has kind of been a constant in my life right from school. And I think it was just like reading through some books. I also remember it may sound silly, but like this movie called Three Idiots. There was one theme there was like focus on excellence and focus on like success is an outcome. So control what you can. I think that has something I've carried throughout. So that is definitely I do. And second is be authentic with people in your relationships, in your interpersonal, because life is not a zero sum game. In situations, sometimes people may kind of forget that. It's important to not have a myopic view and then be just genuine and like help people grow with you. I think that's really important. There are references in game theory that is actually beneficial for your self-interests too in the longer run. So it's important to not just have a zero-sum game kind of attitude in life. Help others succeed with you, and you'll see long-term benefits of that. So I think those are at least what I say in a nutshell. I still do central themes or central values in my that I carry with me.
Right. And how does being yourself manifest in terms of, let's say, your interaction with someone? Maybe can you make it more real? For example, when you came to business school, right?
Yeah.
So that's when nobody knew you here, or most people didn't know you here. So how would being yourself manifest into action? Can you just help make that more real for us?
I think, for example, like in a very simple conversation, right? The first or second day, when someone asks you, hey, how are you? You're like, yeah, I'm great. And it makes sense in the first couple of conversations to have like certain walls. But I think once, deeper relationships can be only built through vulnerability. And when I say being yourself doesn't mean like get all your like kind of whatever you exactly feel, share it. What it means is trying to be open to be vulnerable and create a space. For example, at least some of the deeper connections I have here, over time you learn to open up. And I think that is what being yourself kind of means. Let's say in one-on-one kind of situations, just asking someone like, how was your day? And actually taking an interest in their life, not just for the sake of like asking, hey, how are you? And then just walking away. I've seen a lot of that happen. And that's just how things are. Like that's like the culture overall is in the sense that, life is fast and you'd want to just kind of get on with it. But I think in any like I've seen this even in my recruiting one-on-one chats where actually taking interest in someone else's professional life and asking questions that matter is how that would manifest.
Give me an example of one question that matters when, let's say, you're recruiting for jobs. Just one example.
So asking things like, why did you end up staying in consulting? I don't know if sometimes people do not want to ask such questions, but you would want to know that. And I think breaking that ice so that they can share
Yeah.
something more deeper than that's what's not on the website.
Right. And that's something that not a lot of people would ask, as you mentioned. And it's probably a question that would make somebody think as well,
Uncomfortable.
perhaps. Yeah.
And yeah,
Uncomfortable.
probably, yeah, definitely think as well. But I think most of people are pretty open when you yourself are trying to be authentic in these conversations. They will open up. Like there is also ample research around this that, creating for a leader in teams, if you create a space, if you yourself initiate that ability to create a space where people can be themselves, you will see better results as team cohesion increases, which is pretty interesting around like how these things work out.
Yeah, very interesting. And I also love the fact that you talked about being vulnerable, because that's definitely a huge part of being authentic as well. And
Yeah,
I'm hoping that we will see some of that vulnerability during the show as well.
I'll
So
try.
super, super. Thank you. And all right, so talking about admissions, Giriraj, can you speak about how you approached your Darden essays?
In all honesty, I consider myself not a great writer. I think it's hard for me to take things from your life and write about them. So the way I approached my essays, what I realized along the process, and it actually took me like 2 shots, not at Darden, but like overall B schools in the US. So I have ample amount of effort and time that I've invested. And over time, what I've realized is one of the things you want to do as you approach your essays is kind of just keep writing. You cannot wait for an inspiration to fall in your head and just magically something will appear on your paper. I've realized iteration really helps. So I started with like my life, just collected snippets or stories from my life that I felt are interesting. And in this, look beyond your bigger transitions. Of course, the bigger transitions are you going to your undergrad, then taking a job. But beyond that, like some of those small instances that have had a big impact on you, I think we generally tend to forget. At least when when I was trying to, I'd forgotten a lot of those.
What's an
But
example of a smaller transition?
so I remember for one of the essays I wrote about an interaction I had with one of my friends, back in 11th and 12th, about how he was facing a very small challenge on like kind of coping up with the stress of like entrance exams. And that was a very small instance that I had completely forgotten, but that was a core memory as I kind of went back, and it became a good premise for me to assert that I want to contribute to the community. How I helped my friend work on his journey in a very small instance going back. I think you can kind of use that as a narrative and work through like making a bigger point. Smaller snippets like this can come together as you kind of keep writing. So I remember like in my OneNote, there's a bunch of stories written down and just write them out. You don't even have to like think where you'll apply them, which school will this make sense to. I think first thing, just write whatever comes to your mind and write a lot, because I think one mistake, not mistake, I would say, but like it was an inefficiency on my part is I would wait a lot. I would be like, this is not a great thing to write about. It's pretty trivial. You do not wait like for something bigger to come to you. Just even if it feels trivial in the moment, just kind of keep hashing out and write it on the paper, because you'll realize as soon as you start typing or start writing, as soon as it starts coming on words, either it becomes better or you realize it just doesn't work. So that's really important. I think first is collect all your stories. Second is keep iterating and see what themes play out. For example, Yale has an essay on commitment. I was able to like take the theme on commitment to community. That was one of the examples I picked, like how I helped my friend, and then how I helped like these on-site workers in ExxonMobil. And I kind of use that as themes to tie saying, commitment to helping others, in their journey. So see what themes you can see from your stories and then kind of tailor your essays to a particular business school. I think that's really important. But the art of writing itself, I'm not a great writer. I think I still need to work a lot on that. But what I've realized is a lot of that is just iteration. You cannot be a great writer if you're not open to like yourself fail in the process of writing.
That's really very nicely put. Super helpful. I'm wondering one thing in the world of ChatGPT, does that change anything when it comes to writing?
I will preface this. I had an interesting conversation with one of my really good friends who is doing PhD in AI and ML at NYU. And his work is essentially focused on the question that you asked, especially like writing content, essays in the world of ChatGPT. Like, is that a good or a bad thing? And what he has realized from his research is the diversity in the content has come down. If a lot of people start using ChatGPT, like if you give the group's overall diversity in the content kind of reduces, because you may think that ChatGPT gives you a lot of ideas and a lot of things to work with, but I feel it takes out the originality in your stories and it kind of makes it very generic. The way you should definitely like see ChatGPT as a tool to help you think, especially for writing stories that are very close to you or something that only you have been through and you kind of trying to convey that to B school. Like I would highly recommend to not use ChatGPT, at least in the initial phases. Try to like take the time and the effort to pour your thoughts, even maybe really bad. The sentences may look, they're not working out well, grammatically wrong, but do it on your own. I see ChatGPT as a tool and use that to help you improvise it towards the end, but do not take away the originality of your writing by using ChatGPT early on. I think it will bias you completely and you will not be able to tell stories that are effective and impactful and personal.
Okay, that's really helpful advice. It anchors you, right? It's similar to sample essays where you get anchored to one point of view or one structure, which, as you rightly said, it takes out the originality.
Yeah, when you're here, you also need to submit cover letters. And a lot of people end up using ChatGPT for cover letters too. And I was talking to a career coach at Darden, and he was like, Giri, your cover letter should be something that only you can write. No one else should be able to change the name there and be like, oh, this is another person's cover letter. And that applies to essays too. Like if the name changes and you think that this essay can still apply to that person, then you're not doing a good job. Your essay has to be very personal and something only you can tell. The exclusivity is really important in essays, and I think that will help you differentiate.
I love the exclusivity. I'm going to use that term. Amazing. I really love all the ideas which you've shared. So thank you so much for that. I'd love for you to talk just a little bit more about the individual essays. So there's 4 essays which I would love for you to talk about. One essay is what do you want your classmates to know about you that is not on your resume? Then there's a diversity and inclusion prompt. There's a prompt about goals, and then there's a scholarship essay. So if you could speak about these, it'll be really helpful.
So the first essay, what do you want your classmates to know? The way I wanted to put this was to share something that's more personal, that goes beyond my resume. The way I thought about this was I would want them to know how I have kind of grown in my journey. Sharing something that's more personal to you. And again, like try to be a little bit diplomatic here in how you approach this essay. Like when I say share something personal, try to understand what part of your life you want to share with the admissions committee at this stage. So I shared how I was a very introverted person growing up and how I did things that helped me grow out of that shell. And kind of I spoke about like how my stint as the captain of the racing team at my institute was a key component to break out of that and take up leadership positions. I think something where you show your evolution as a person, I would say. For the second essay on diversity, so they want to see how you collaborate with people, is my understanding. I think I would probably approach it with, an instance where you have created a space for other team members to be a part of a conversation. And it can be as simple as like helping an intern be a part of your workplace. I had a project that I actually did where I helped underprivileged, low-income women, and how I went out to them and did surveys to collect their opinion on a bus accessibility project that I was doing. It was a side project, not a part of my ExxonMobil work. It was with an NGO. So I kind of worked around that theme on like creating a platform to draw voices from people. And kind of way to rephrase that question is how your presence enhances the inclusivity in a space. What did you do that changed the outcome in terms of teamwork? What is the third essay again?
There's a short goals prompt. Yeah, I don't know if you have any feedback for that.
I think this is a pretty standard essay. So
that is true. And what about the scholarship essay? And was there a specific scholarship essay that you answered? And if you can share.
No, there is. So at least for my scholarship, generally when Darden gives scholarships, they just award you based on the strength of your candidacy. There is definitely one called the Batten Scholarship. letter. I did write that, but I was awarded the Allan and Barbara Staats fellowship. So at least for scholarships at Darden, I think in the first year, it's mostly based on your candidacy, the strength of your resume, to some extent scores, your answers, your interview, all of it combined. But there's no specific essay that you probably want to answer except for the Baton essay.
Understood. That's helpful. And Giriraj, you also talked about how this was your second time applying. Could you give us a sense for how you approached your applications first time around and what changed the second time?
First time, I think I was very hasty in my applications. Hasty in the sense that the GMAT took me longer and it was still not up to the mark, in my opinion. When I look at my first attempt essays, I just cannot identify myself with it, mostly because I did not think through what the prompt meant and it did not give the time that it takes. It takes time to craft good essays and it takes time to think through these things. So I would say I classify the first attempt as a very hasty. And for whatever reason, I felt like I could do it, which was such a humbling experience. What I did not do well was not really taking the time and talking to people. I did not connect to people at all in my first attempt. I connected to just a couple of folks in students at schools or alums, and that was it. I did not really go in depth to understand each and every school. And I think it's really important as you apply to schools, you'd want to really kind of know where you want to go. I was just applying to schools based on the brand and the ranking. And if you had asked me where Tuck was or where Yale was, I wouldn't be even able to tell you where the schools were in my first attempt. So of course it didn't work out. And what I did in my second attempt was completely different. One thing I thought was I had to fix my GMAT. So I did that. I appeared for the GMAT again. So in my second attempt, I kind of got pretty good above average score. My first attempt score was
what was the first and the second?
So 710 in my first and then 740 in my second attempt. So I thought 710 is a good score. You can probably, that's the average score that Darden, I didn't apply to Darden my first attempt, but most of the schools kind of list as their average score for the incoming class. This is, I think, a sad truth. Indian male engineers, the demand for seats is really high. So 710, in my opinion, doesn't work. Maybe exception in your profile or at your work, but I think it may hinder. You may not be able to get a seat on the discussion table. So fix my GMAT. But I don't think that was my only problem in my first attempt. I don't think it was the GMAT that stopped me, or it was the only thing that stopped me. But second time around, I did a bunch of things. I actually interacted a lot with the students here. And I had a strategy around which schools I want to target in the first round, in the early rounds, and then which schools I want to target the later rounds. Because your essays, at least for me, it was true, it's kind of improve as you progress in the rounds because you now have more time, you have reflected a lot, you can now rehash and the whole process becomes more efficient. So apply in the early action programs at these schools. I think it really helps, in my opinion, to even for scholarships, it does help. And second, take the time to do the research for every school is very different. At least even with Darden, I felt that I did not really understand how different it was when I was applying. But once you're here, you actually start to see that there are elements that you didn't even think about. And I think it's very important to do that research when you are, especially on the other side of the world and applying to these schools. So I did that in my second round and I actually took a lot of time writing my essays. So worked my essays a lot in my second attempt, which I think a combination of all these efforts seem to have helped.
Okay, that's amazing. And did you reapply to any of the schools?
So in my first attempt, I applied only to 4 schools. In the second attempt, I think I reapplied to Duke and MIT.
Okay, so there were some reapplications.
In my opinion, reapplications are harder. Getting an admit, again, I have no data to kind of back this, but this is just my understanding that it's hard to justify as a reapplicant why they should take you. So, when I was applying in my first attempt, I had made a conscious decision to not apply to Darden, apply to Tuck instead of Darden. And I don't know why in my head, I was they are very similar in their overall, which to an extent they are, but to a greater extent they are not. But I had made this conscious choice to not apply to certain schools in my first attempt. So that's why I had a bunch of other schools I could apply in my second attempt, and I was a fresh applicant to them. So
okay, understood. That's helpful. And how long do you think people should give themselves for their applications?
Again, it depends on how much effort and time you're able to put on a consistent basis. I do think having at least a couple of months before the deadline, I think is good enough for you to do the research, talk to people, and then work on your essays. And you definitely have like instances where you're on a time crunch.
Yeah.
And in those cases, like you'd have to just burn the midnight oil and work on those essays. But in my opinion, writing doesn't work very well if you do that, because you need a break from writing for you to have or craft better essays. So try to avoid those instances where you're kind of at the very last end. So give yourself time, start preparing at least 2 months before, and get the GMAT done in the very first stage.
Okay, that's really helpful. And Giriraj, I also want to talk about the interview, right? Can you share your Darden interview experience?
It was very nice. It was very friendly.
Who was it with? Was it
I
with
had
a
a
student?
second year student who take my interview. And I remember Darden especially has like a monologue that you need to give in like the first 10 minutes, which was very interesting. I gave like a bunch of interviews, but I don't think any other school does that.
No other
and
school has that.
I remember preparing for it too. I think I actually practiced that 8-10 minute, and I didn't have exact sentences that I would want to say, but like just an outline of things I want to say about myself, I want to talk about. So I spoke about like, my upbringing, and then like very briefly, like this is where I was born, and look, I can speak 5 languages to like make an impact and break the ice. And then I spoke about like my education a little bit, what I did at my institute, something that I learned, very interesting, and then spoke about my work. But I had an outline. So like have an outline and just practice the outline and say it out loud at least a few times. That's really helpful. And record yourself and see how that comes out. This is exactly what I did. And I think it was really helpful. Sometimes they may say like, hey, look, that was really interesting. Can you elaborate a bit more? I think that's your moment to shine. That's your moment to be like yourself and just be able to hold those conversations. Don't appear too rehearsed, too robotic. That won't work in your favor.
Okay, that's really insightful. Yeah, the monologue is something I definitely wanted to hear about. So I appreciate you volunteering that information. And you earned or you were awarded an $80,000 merit-based scholarship, right? You talked about the components that are important for that. Can you touch upon how applicants can maximize their chances of securing a scholarship? I feel like some of it we've already talked about, right? So do well on the tests. I think that's one.
Yeah.
Then work hard on your essays. That's another one, clearly. And I guess some of it will be already set in stone, right? With like it doesn't matter what college people go to and what companies they've worked at, or is it more important what kind of work they've done?
This is a slightly harder question. I think the reality is it does matter where you have worked at. Like the brands help for sure, where you studied. And I do feel and I do trust the fact that all of that can be trumped if you have a great experience. If you have done something or if at least you have shown a ton of maturity in the whole process, like the essays, the type of content, essays that you've drafted, or the interview that you've given. If you're able to show something that's beyond the type of candidates they admit, I think you will be able to get showing a ton of maturity in the entire process. And like the way you interact and present yourself to the committee, I think that may be also one of the levers that you can pull to help maximize the scholarships that you're awarded. But a lot of that, you're right, is set in stone with your previous work experience, and the scores that you have is another thing that you can do.
Okay. All right. That's helpful. Thanks. Giriraj, can you speak about what the evaluation criteria for admissions committee is while admitting students at Darden?
Probably not the best at this, at least. But one thing just drawing from what, the type of people I interact with here, I think a big part of it, what I see here is people are very balanced in terms of like, they do show a lot of genuineness. So a bigger advantage, at least one thing I see at the Darden community is the collaborative community. They are always ready to like support each other, be it recruitment, any other kind of events. I've seen them kind of create a good space for people around them. I'm not sure how the admissions committee is able to figure all of that. I think it's pretty interesting how they're able to do this, but I do feel collaboration is a big component. So if you're able to show some of that element in your application, I think it'll be really, really great.
Understood. And how would you define Darden's unique identity? Is collaboration the word that comes to mind, or is there something else you would?
Unique identity, I think rigorous. I feel it's probably one of the most rigorous schools. Rigorous in the sense that it makes you work hard. And I wanted to be in a school that makes me work hard. And this is to say Darden actually loves creating a great classroom environment for you. So I think that is definitely one of the things that I feel like Darden is known for, is its rigor in programming.
Yeah. That's very, very true. And I think a lot of that is also because of the case method, right? So
Yeah.
perhaps now is as good a time as any for you to speak a little bit about the case method, maybe even talk about how many cases you're working on through a week and how you engage with your learning team and how class discussions happen. Maybe if you could touch upon some of these points.
Darden is a 100% case method school, and the academics revolves around the case method. Every subject, every course is taught through a case. So at least in the first year, in quarter one, we had like 6 courses. In a week, we would actually be doing like 6 cases, which is, now that I think about it, it's a lot. So at Darden, we have like Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off. So you get ample time to prepare for the week. Most of the Fridays and Saturdays are pretty much, working on preparing for the next week. And that's where like the learning team really plays a bigger role, because you will soon realize as you work through cases that you cannot do all the cases on your own. One thing I've learned in B school is you cannot do everything. You have to figure out a way to leverage people and work through, especially like the cases.
And if you can also talk about what the learning team is, folks who don't know.
Yeah. So we have 5 sections. It's a group of like 6 to 7 people. It's specifically designed to like not have people from your own sections. So my learning team has, everyone from different sections. The learning team is essentially designed so that you kind of leverage each other for your case preparation. So you can meet over the weekends, and like prepare. One of the things with case method is it's very important for you to do the assignments before the class or read the cases before the class. And sometimes you have to like actually do an entire model, work through the numbers, like read the material and then go to the class. So this is a big change from what I had experienced back in India. I would just go to the class without really expecting what they're going to teach me today. Here you are not just expected to know what you're going to learn, but actually expected to know almost every detail. So the learning team is kind of designed to help. So think of it like I would prepare a case and I would share that with the learning team, and we would all have a discussion around whether there is, whether it makes sense. Do we want to do something differently? How do we solve this problem in a different way, etc., etc.
Yeah, and so, everyone's from different sections?
Yes, everyone is from different sections.
Okay, got it. So you're also getting the feedback from whatever's happening in each section, like each member of the learning team is bringing that to the learning team, which is very, very thoughtful, I must say.
Very, very thoughtful. And I think one of the best things about Darden is it's very structured, the way it's designed. And everything, they're trying to maximize your interaction across sections and within your section. So they're actually trying to like build more interconnected community, which is pretty interesting how like the program is designed. So coming back to the learning team, you have like 6, 7 people, and I would say like I have one of the best learning teams here at Darden. Amazing people.
What does your learning team look like, so people can get a sense for what working on a team is like at business school?
Yeah, so it consists of myself. There's Beth, who's an African American. We have Katie.
And if you could talk a little bit about their backgrounds as well, like the past industry.
Beth worked in like financial services before. Katie was working in DC. She was doing more of like international development type of work. Then I have Santosh, who also happens to be my flatmate in my learning team. Santosh was...
That's pretty insane that you guys are flatmates as well.
Yeah, that was probably one of the very unique and the most random thing that has happened.
It's probably super rare as well for that to happen.
It is very rare for that to happen. And I'm so glad that we are in the same learning team. So Santosh, who used to be software developer. Then we have Austin. Austin also worked in financial services before. We have Rick. So he's a doctor and he just finished, medical school. He's pursuing like MBA now. And then we have Jane, who's from China, and she worked in marketing before. So very diverse backgrounds, people from different countries. And again, like I think the way it's designed is to have that diversity in the learning team too. I do feel like learning teams are designed in that way, kind of maximize not just your academic outcomes, but also like your ability to like work in very diverse teams. So I would say like my learning team is very diverse. They bring like different experiences. And so that plays out as you do cases that are very different from your background. So any healthcare cases, I remember Rick would have ton of information and ton of like personal experiences to add to, hey, this is probably not how it works, or how my experience was in dealing with the healthcare industry. So that was really interesting, and how those experiences kind of play out in the interactions.
Yeah, very cool. Can you give us a sense for how the class discussion plays out through the case method? Maybe you could share an experience from one of the cases that you really enjoyed?
So it's very unique. No classes are the same. It's kind of very interesting how like the professor is able to create a very engaging discussion. And you would see at Darden, most of them read the cases and prepare in extensive detail. So they have a lot to talk in the classes, and it creates a very engaging atmosphere. And so the Darden classic way is the professor starts with a cold call. So, you'd never know. One day you'd just be cold call, be like, Giri, what do you think about the case? Can you please, imagine yourself to the CEO? What is your decision on this case? And that can happen to anyone. So you have to be prepared for a cold call. There's so many cases kind of getting hazy on like which particular case to pick on. But there was this case on like LVMH kind of acquiring Tiffany. And we were just discussing through, and like the cold call was to someone in my class, and it'd be like, so what's your decision as the LVMH CEO to would you acquire Tiffany or not? So things like that, it generally plays out. There's a lot of humor in the class. It's a very fun, humorous experience at times. And some people are like really just interesting and they make interesting comments. And like that brings out a lot of humor. And it's important for you to participate. You not really get the bang for your buck if you do not participate. It's really important if you're going to a case method school, put in the effort to read the cases and actually being engaged in the discussion. I remember like at least in the early days, it feels there's a certain hesitation for you to raise your hand. And you're always like, what will people think? Does this point make sense? I think soon you'll realize that it doesn't matter. It's important to take the space and share and improve your thoughts on the go. So I think that's the benefit of the case method. It helps you think on your feet. Cold calls, especially, like it helps you tackle pointed conversations that you.
Very nice. And how do you think you've developed as a result of participating in so many cases? How does that shape you as a person?
I think a bigger aspect is when you read so many cases, right? You soon start to like, there's just so many things that I wasn't aware of. I'm taking courses on in this quarter. I'm reading about WTO and like how that has shaped the world. I'm reading about private equity and like how you value companies. When you read them in detail and how a specific firm, when they were acquiring, let's say, a firm, like how did they think through? How did the CEO or the founder actually think through? You start to see yourself in their shoes. And I think that develops a very different mindset approaching a business decision. So that is like a big thing is you consume a lot of really, really good content when you are at Darden, especially through like 100% case method. And it forces you to do that because you have to be able to participate in the class the next day. And especially being in the classroom, I think the ability to just be very attentive and be able to like listen to people and think about the discussions and the problems from their point of view. Because what happens, at least in the beginning, I would be so engrossed in what I want to say that what people are saying kind of takes a backseat. The conversation kind of phases out. What I've learned is it's way more important to be a great listener in a case method setting. It's again counterintuitive. You want to be a great listener for you to be a great contributor. It actually develops you as a great listener, I feel, in my opinion. And you learn to be impressed by like what different people from their different experiences can think about the same problem. And I think you also learn to respectfully disagree in a classroom. It's pretty important to like learning to disagree on things that you may not see or you may not think that's your way on. It shapes you in multitude of ways, I feel. And every day I go in with like a lot of enthusiasm. Like I want to kind of contribute and I want to today we're going to learn something very different. And to me, it's like a lot of fun. And it can also be really exhausting and tiring because it demands a lot from you. Every week, every day demands a lot from you. But I think it's very, very fulfilling towards the end.
Interesting. And sometimes I wondered if the case method is also partially responsible for Darden's strength in placing students in management consulting.
This can be debated. I personally think there is some element of it. I wouldn't kind of completely say like, Darden's case method helps with consulting casing. Like that is a different casing, which people say casing or problem solving in. And that's
not
a very
not the
thing.
Casing, but students' ability to do well in their jobs.
Definitely. I think, yeah, that is something I've heard from the recruiters as well. The feedback or the reason they keep coming to Darden and like keep recruiting in such big numbers is I think Darden students perform exceptionally well at their internships and at their jobs. And I do think a lot of that is because of the rigor of the curriculum. Darden actually forces you to do a lot of work. When you go to like consulting, it's in a way simulating some of that experience for you, like the time constraints, the amount of work. When you go to your consulting or IB job, you in a way kind of used to it. And that's why like the identity of Darden, even in the North Americas, like across business schools, is that it's a rigorous. People from Darden are hard workers. We work hard.
Very cool. That's really interesting and very helpful insight as well. And Giriraj, what are the flagship events throughout the year which attract the maximum attendance?
At Darden, there's always something happening. So vibrant and like the community so active. Oh wow, there's a bunch of events. But I think for me, like the event in the very beginning of the year, that's called the Food Festival, is probably one of the most popular events at Darden. The Food Festival is essentially like, so you can create a group and you can go participate in the food festival as one of the stalls. So you can represent your country and like a specific food or dish that you want, and you can serve it to the Darden community. And this has a bunch of things. It's food. There's also like a lot of performances that happen as a part of the festival, music, dance, and in a way it brings the entire community at the very start of the year together. It's pretty interesting. Like I got to see and I got to taste a bunch of different foods from across.
What's your favorite?
Across the world. So one thing I really, really enjoyed was the Nigerian jollof rice. It's a very spicy, rice dish that they have, and African community is very, very proud of that. And I think it does justice to what the pride that they carry. I think it was one of the most favorite dishes I kind of tasted in that food festival. It's one of my favorites. Yeah.
Any other event?
So that is the food festival is one. I think the other one that I really enjoyed was the Darden talent show. So like Darden has different sections. So we have like 5 sections, and in the first year, these sections essentially compete with each other for the Darden Cup. And this is a year-long event. And a part of this tournament is something called as the Darden Talent Show, where each section is given 20-25 minutes to put together an act. And that, I think it's phenomenal to see like what different talents people carry and like how different sections kind of mock each other as a part of their act. There's a lot of like competitive spirit, camaraderie. So the whole screening happened at one of like a theater here in Charlottesville. It's not a screening, it's like an actual performance. So the whole act happens at a theater. So I'm part of section A, and we had like a professor be a part of the act, second years be a part of the act, and overall like 30-40 people were a part of that entire act that we put together. And I think that particular event has a lot of like attendance. So it's it's a big thing. The talent show is something that I really enjoyed as a Darden experience.
Very nice. There's also this tradition of first coffee, right? Talk about what it is and what does it mean to the student body. Why does Darden organize this?
So a little bit of history, like I am very curious about like how things come into being. So first coffee, I think one of the very earliest classes probably goes back to like 1960s or 70s. One of the classes actually started a tradition where after every first class, they would gather around and they would just have conversations over coffee. And that kind of became like the third estate or the third pillar for conversation, kind of creating a more intertwined community. And that tradition has been carried on since years and years and years since that beginning class. So between the first and second class, we have like a 35-minute break. So that happens here at like, there's a central hall called as the PepsiCo Forum. So people from all sections just come get a coffee and you just have conversations. And it's pretty interesting. On some days you have croissant, some days you have like some fruits. And it's just fun to like engage with folks maybe you haven't seen for a while, you haven't spoken for a while, or talk to other sections and see what they how was the discussion and what was fun, what was not fun. It's a space for you to come together, I would say. And these are very small things, but I think they carry a lot of weight in building a community at the school.
Very nice. Yeah, it's very unique. I haven't heard of any other school that does it. And I don't think you're paying for the coffee, right? The school sponsors
the school is sponsoring the coffee.
And that's every single day. That's
single day.
That's very generous, I must say. I remember paying even for printing when I was at Wharton.
So, definitely very generous. And there's like different varieties of coffee. If you want hot chocolate, get hot chocolate. If you like want cold coffee, get cold coffee. So I think Darden kind of arranges a lot of that. It's pretty cool, I would say. It's really interesting and how communities are built just through like simple traditions.
Very interesting. Giriraj, I also want to talk about the location, Charlottesville, right? So how does the Charlottesville location enhance the Darden experience?
But I feel what like Charlottesville is pretty much like a town in Virginia. It's like a student town, I would say. The biggest population in Charlottesville is the University of Virginia students. And in my opinion, I think it's a great place for you to come and actually be a part of like a school experience. What it does is it houses all the students at one place. I literally walk to the school and it takes me like 6 minutes to walk from my place to the school.
And where do you live?
So I live in Ivy apartments, basically like a student housing community. Most of the people that live here are mostly like business school students. And like we have some from law school.
This is owned by UVA, the housing where you stay?
I'm not sure. I don't think it's owned by UVA. It's definitely built
It's not on
UVA
campus.
grounds.
Oh, it is on.
It is on campus. It is on grounds. I think it's managed by like a different third party, but probably like it is the land and all is still owned by
And
UVA.
almost everyone lives on grounds.
Yeah, everyone lives on grounds. Like almost everyone. Like I think there's no exception to that. Most of them live in Ivy, or there's another very popular location called the Pavilion, both of which are 8 minute walk to the school. And the fact that everyone like resides very close to each other is great, because a lot of like interactions outside the class kind of happen at these places. It can be your parties. It can be like just hosting people for another event during the weekends. Like all of that happens in these places. And I think that's great.
And I hear you cook as well, right? And you like having people over for food.
I love cooking. I love kind of hosting people. And I've realized people love Indian food a lot. So that's something that I kind of
What dishes are you feeding them?
Indian lentils, dal. It's a signature dish.
Is it the black dal?
So black dal on certain occasions, but most of it is generally like the yellow, like dal tadka.
So people like that as well.
People love that. I remember even like the first learning team interaction we had was at my place, and me and Santosh cooked dal and like had, rice and naan. That was like how we as a learning team kind of bonded. So
nice. How do you source things like naan? Is there like an Indian grocery store there?
There is an Indian grocery store. Generally, like we tend to order on Walmart for very specific Indian things.
Walmart? Is that what you said?
On Walmart.
Okay.
And if you need like very specific Indian like spices, then there is a grocery store, Indian, that we go to generally.
Is that by the downtown mall?
That's slightly further than the downtown mall. So that's generally like on a weekend. And once we go, like we kind of hoard a lot of supplies to last us for at least a month or so. Most of the daily grocery supplies, there's like 2 stores very like nearby, walkable distance.
Which ones?
There's Kroger's and there's Harry's Teeter's. These are like pretty big stores, and you can get like your veggies. You can get like a lot of other stuff from these places. So those are like the most often visited places.
Right. Is there a Costco nearby as well?
There is a Costco nearby.
Buy in bulk, save some money.
There's a Costco nearby. Yeah, you need a Costco membership, or you need someone who has a Costco membership. That has been pretty convenient, I feel, like getting supplies, or I didn't have any kind of issues around like having stuff or buying stuff from this place.
Right. And when it comes to eating out, what are your favorite restaurants?
There's quite a few in downtown. So downtown Charlottesville has like a bunch of restaurants, and it's pretty nice to walk around there. One of my favorites is this place called the Thai Place. It's called as the Thai Place. They serve probably one of the best drunken noodles.
Nice. I love drunken noodles in America. This may be controversial, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say it. I feel like Thai food is really good in America.
I think so. I haven't been to Thailand, so I don't know how great it is. But
I visited recently, and I definitely love Thai food in America.
So this place, this is the first time I actually had drunken noodles, and it was amazing. Like I think that's the place I've gone like several times now. I'm I love Asian food a lot. So there's another place called Chiang Thai, which is pretty nearby, which is great.
Are you vegetarian, Giriraj?
I'm a vegetarian, yes.
Okay, so what kind of vegetarian dishes can you get in a Chinese place? Because I think that's something that can be harder if you're in America.
What I've found is, especially if you go to like Asian places, you can get a lot more vegetarian food than the non-Asian places, because a lot of their dishes are designed around like a lot of veggies. And in fact, with veganism becoming so prominent.
Oh, right. Yeah, things have changed as well.
Things have changed pretty much. So those are like pretty much 2 great restaurants. And there's also like a bunch in downtown that I often visit.
Okay, very nice. And are there any favorite student bars?
So Charlottesville has like a lot of bars, but I think so Darden has this thing called as the Thursday night dancing club. TNDC. So every Thursday is like the end of the Darden week. So every Thursday, there's a mail that is sent out, with like different every week is a different location to go to a bar to kind of dance to the beats. You'd see like first year, second years, kind of all of them go to these places every week. There's a few like that I recall. There's Boylan Heights that's nearby. There's Fitzroy. Pretty nice, like very vibey dance and like bar places that I have really enjoyed kind of going to.
Very fun, very fun. Charlottesville is a really, really nice city.
It's a very
remember
nice
loving
city.
it.
I think one of the interesting things about Charlottesville is a lot of like nature is very pretty. And if you're an outdoorsy person, you'd love it. Like it has a lot of hiking trails that you can go to. And the best part about this place is you can see all four seasons. And as the colors of leaves change, sometimes you like just stop as you're walking and you're like, this is actually so pretty. I've done that so many times and I've just stopped walking and I've like actually taken a vaccine and admired where I am. It's very low-key, quiet, very like scenic as a place to actually study and kind of get away from like the hustle bustle of like the city.
I must say you're a wonderful ambassador for the school, because even as you're talking, I'm like, oh my God, I want to go to school here.
You should. It's actually it's very, very, very great. Even like the snow. I remember when we had a snowfall in December. It was actually my first snowfall experience. The school looks very pretty. Like I think saying that is an understatement. It is actually like wow, very impressive in how like the structure kind of it's nice. It's just nice to like click pictures and take a moment in the setting.
Yeah, the campus is beautiful. No two opinions about that.
No, yeah, it's probably one of the best campuses I've seen here.
Nice. Yeah. The architecture and the vibe is really nice. And a little bit of a tactical question, Giriraj. How much does housing cost and how much can students expect to spend on food every month?
So the place I'm at currently, it costs us around $1,600. And since I'm sharing, it's a 2B place. So that per person comes around like $800-900, which I think is pretty cheap given what you pay in the cities. And I would say food cost overall, I think you'd probably end up spending like, including utilities and all of that, I guess, given again like how your expenditure is, but on an average like $1,200 to $1,500.
And this includes eating out, partying as well.
Everything, partying, everything.
Yeah.
And again, like depends on how hard you party, but I'm sure some people probably can also spend more than that. But $1,500 is a cap, I would say, if you're living in Charlottesville.
Yeah. If you're straining your liver quite a bit.
If you're training your liver, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And briefly touching upon academics, Giriraj, when it comes to electives, who are the favorite professors and what are the favorite classes?
So I may not be a great person right now because like the way the Darden curriculum is structured is like the first year is like your core curriculum. Your electives only open up in Q4. So right now in this quarter, I'm taking like 3 electives and like 2 are still core courses. The entire electives will open up in the second year. But I think like some of the most sought after classes or professors, I would say what I really enjoyed, I got to learn from like the pioneer in business ethics, Dr. Edward Freeman. He was the one who came up with the stakeholder theory in business management and is like a world-renowned professor. So he taught our class ethics in Q3, a great person kind of in your classroom. And like, it's so privileged to like actually get a chance to learn from him. I also, remember learning accounting. I never knew accounting could be so much fun. Before coming to Darden, I remember thinking like, I would not like accounting, but we have this really amazing professor. Her name is Luann Lynch, an accounting legend known across the schools here. And I had the pleasure to like sit in her classes, learn from her. She's amazing, like very humorous, and she makes accounting come to life through the case method. Some electives, I think, that people, or at least like I've heard a lot of people talk about, is a class called Negotiations, taught by Professor Roshni. And it kind of creates simulations where you actually go end up negotiating on a deal. This is something I really want to take next quarter. I did not get that class in this quarter because even though I bid for it, the bid was so high that I just didn't get it. So that's a very sought after elective here at Darden.
Okay, very nice. And Giriraj, I also want to spend some time on recruiting, with the tremendous success you've had getting an internship with McKinsey. Can you speak about your internship recruiting experience? Maybe you can talk about the timeline for recruiting, once you arrived on campus?
Yeah, I think recruiting, probably in my opinion, every MBA is once you get to the school, like you'd be surprised, but most of your time is revolves around recruiting, at least in the first few months. So I remember August first week is when our classes started, and September first week is when like the whole recruiting process was in full flow already. Kind of one advice I would have, as if you're preparing to come to school is, at like where do you want to be at least in your internships, when sometimes they want to like they see when they're applying, they're like, oh, I'll think through what I want to do in my life in the time of the MBA, but you do not have any time to think about it. Like once you're here, it's like go, go, go. So your time to reflect is actually during the application process, or in the time you're preparing to arrive to the school. And that can be like if you want to do consulting, or if you want to do banking, if you want to do tech or general management, kind of think through these decisions way in advance. So September, kind of like the recruiting kicks off. September mid is when McKinsey hosted like a big event where like many consultants from around across different offices flew in to the campus, and there was like this. They took us to a vineyard, and we had these like we could engage with any consultant we wanted, like start building a network with the firm. So a big component to my friends coming from India or thinking about a US MBA is like networking is a really big component in the recruiting process. And networking in a sense, like being able to, one is put yourself forward and create connections who will root for you in the application process. That's what I kind of think when I think of networking. So September mid is when like the networking starts in full flow. And based on these bigger events, you start creating, you like become really good connections with this one person, one consultant. So then you write an email to them saying, hey, really love talking to you. I would love to like have another conversation. And so now you start creating a network for yourself. And that would happen over the course of like the next couple of months.
Yeah. What kind of things does one talk about through these conversations?
So the networking is more for you to understand like what the consulting life looks like, what the firm looks like, because it's very important to understand the fit, for them to understand whether you fit into the firm, and even for you to understand whether that firm would be a great fit for you.
Yeah.
So basically,
but how do you engage people with questions that don't lead to them repeating the same thing they've been talking about? Because there's so many students, right? Yeah.
Going deeper into like what they say and like asking questions that matter to you. For example, I had an oil and gas background. So I would engage specifically people working in energy and working in sustainability, because then you have like a common topic to engage with, and then you can get into more details around, what's this practice look like, what type of work you're doing, who and which office does like most of the work. Another thing that I should mention is it's very important to know where, even in the US, like at least where do you want to go, which office you want to like kind of target. That's also like a bigger decision. I feel like people are generally, at least international students, are like generally very confused which office they want to select. So I think a tip there would be to interact with the alumni who are in these offices and use these consulting chats as a great place for you to understand and get a feel of like the city, get a feel of the office itself. You kind of commit. So there is a timeline when you have to actually commit to the firm, which office you want to like apply for.
By when do you have to commit?
I think that's October first week.
Or that's really soon.
It's everything, like once you're here, everything is like very, very fast. So you do not have a lot of time to make a lot of these decisions. So important to kind of think through. This is something that I hadn't thought through very well. I just had like a general sense of where I want to go. But I think having conversations here and like leveraging your second years who have worked or interned at these offices, that really helps you.
And is it because of your oil and gas background that you went for the Houston location?
Yes, that was one of the reasons. The other thing is I also have a bunch of like connections in Houston. And I felt it's a great place for me. Like there's a bunch of reasons. Texas has no
good weather.
Good weather. It's hot. I would
actually, yeah, I would think of summer as good weather. So maybe that's why.
Yeah, probably. But I think overall it's a good weather, except for the summers. It's pretty hot. But yeah, I had like one was the oil and gas experience, no state taxes. It's a relatively low cost of living. So that was like, my reasons, and great food. This like the city is known for like really, really good food. overall.
Very nice.
Those were my reasons to like kind of go choose Texas and
And
Houston
did you
specifically.
get to visit the city before committing to it?
I had already been to Houston when I was working with Exxon. But generally, like I know people who, like, let's say a lot of people who were coming to the US for the first time. Some people and chose to visit the city before they made a decision. Some people just like relied on people and like made a decision. Whatever works for you, I think go with that. It does make sense to go to the city and see how that feels. But again, like, it has worked out for people either ways.
Yeah. Nice. And when do you make your applications and when are interviews held?
I think the applications are sent in end of November. Like I recall just having tons and tons of conversation until that point of time. Also, you're recruiting with a lot of other firms too. So you need to kind of balance your networking with every firm, have backups, general management type of career. Even you have to network with not just like consulting firms, but even with like the bigger companies who are hiring for GM type of roles. Because I think that helps you stand out in the overall process. So a lot of my fall break went into networking, building those connections. I think November, December is when you submit applications. And then December end is when like interview invites between like first week and end, like interview invites kind of start rolling out. And the interviews are often held in like the first week of January.
Oh, okay. So you're not getting a lot of time for the prep if you start after receiving the invite.
Yeah, so that's why you start like way early,
When
hoping
do
that
you
you'll
start?
at least land. So there are two components to like the consulting preparation, the interview preparation. Bigger part of it, which a lot of students will focus on, is the consulting case process or the casing. And that kind of starts right after like the fall break.
So like when you say fall break, what are you referring to?
So fall break, that would be like end of October.
Oh, okay.
So
Understood.
some people kind of even start during the break itself. Break is like just after quarter one at Darden.
Okay.
There's a break and then quarter two begins. And quarter two, most of the time, like people end up preparing for the consulting interviews.
Right. What does case interviewing look like, or what does casing look like? Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, it's essentially a business case that you are, given in an interview. So for example, the interview would be like, we have a client who is a mid-size automotive company. They're a manufacturer of trucks, and they are looking to enter an emerging market. Which country should we recommend to them, and why? The point is, you need to think about this in a very through a business lens, and you need to come up with. They want to see like structured problem solving through this. So it's a very vague kind of statement in the very beginning. But then you need to kind of add structure to it. You'll engage with your interviewer to get more information. There are charts, there are exhibits that are given to you. So you make sense of them, you interpret them. There are numbers that go around. You make calculations and ultimately make a recommendation. So Darden, I think, especially like the consulting club at Darden, does a phenomenal job in kind of training you for this process. And I think consulting casing is an acquired skill. It needs a lot of practice, and you need to work on it quite a lot for you to build that skill. And one of the great things about Darden is you're paired with a second year coach very early on. So my coach Mark, he's going to Bain, so he had already done this process. And so second years are very helpful in helping you, in kind of with this casing process and improving your skills on this. I remember I ended up like practicing at least 30, 40 cases before my interviews. And so this is like a bigger portion of the interview preparation. The other portion is the behavioral preparation, like answering the behavioral questions. And so that's again, like that's where you need to finesse your stories, be able to talk about them. And especially McKinsey has like a very different way to evaluate like the behavioral aspect. So McKinsey has 3 interviews back to back. And there is only one behavioral question that is asked, and you need to give a 7 to 8 minute monologue about that.
Same as Darden.
Very same as Darden. It's interesting how like this plays out. So McKinsey's behavioral questions or interview is kind of designed to see how you think about a situation in your head. They want to go in your head and like why did you not do this versus why did you do this? What did you feel when you like took a certain decision? And every firm has a very different way. So a lot of people kind of overlook the behavioral questions part, but I think it's equally weighed in the consulting process.
What are some examples of behavioral questions?
With other firms, some of the behavioral questions are pretty standard, like tell me about a time, when you faced a challenge or this and that. For McKinsey, like there are behavioral questions are listed on their website. They have it right on the website, and they will ask you the same question in the interview. So they're evaluating like, 3-4 things. Like they're evaluating like they call something called as a personal impact on how you. So they'll, one question be like, tell me about a time when you were faced with a very challenging situation and how did you like overcome it. Or one of the questions could be like, tell me about time when you had a conflict with your management and how did you work through that conflict. They want to essentially see all of this is listed on their website. They like what they are trying to evaluate, and they have a rubric on how they're marking or like how they're evaluating you. So it's very standardized, I would say.
Yeah. Do we know what the rubric is?
No, I have no clue what the rubric looks like.
Okay.
So that's a very tactical thing. Does it really matter what the rubric looks like? I think what matters is knowing your story well and being able to communicate that well to an audience. Focusing on that really helps instead of worrying about what they want to hear. People sometimes can confuse or like rehash their stories and what they want to hear. But I think that's not a very good approach. If something stands out to you and your story, it will stand out to them too. So there's
Okay.
game theory 101.
Okay, nice. And how many Indian students from India are there in your class?
I think this class has the highest number of like Indian students in Darden's history. We have, I don't know the exact number, I think between 40 and 50.
Okay, that's pretty high. Do we know why that is?
I'm exactly not sure, but I think just on a passing conversation, my understanding is there has been a lot of interest from the Indian, a lot of demand from the Indian.
Understood.
And Darden also wants to grow their Indian community.
Interesting. Which makes sense. Yeah, definitely the place to be going forward.
Moving. I probably feel that's why that has happened. And I think it's probably the trend will stay. We'll see how the next class looks like.
Interesting. And out of these 40 to 50 students, how many folks have gotten internship offers in management consulting?
So not everyone will apply for consulting.
Of course not.
So I feel like the ratio is like 50% consulting, most of them IB, the smaller chunks. I think people who wanted consulting, most of them have gotten consulting. This especially like the Darden numbers are like probably they're very similar to what we had last year, which is
so there hasn't been a decline with the market.
At least the bigger firms have recruited in the same size.
Interesting. Do we know how many Indian students got recruited for internships?
I exactly don't know the number. I know there are a few people who are still recruiting, who are still searching for internships.
Are we saying that maybe 10 students are going to consulting for internships or
more than that? I think consulting, I know just McKinsey, I know like there are like 7 or 8 Indians.
Oh, wow. That is a lot. That is interesting.
So definitely more than like
and
that.
Is banking pretty big as well among Indian?
Banking is pretty big.
Which firms?
I think banking, again, I'm not very well.
You're not sure because of course you didn't recruit for it.
I didn't recruit, but I know
consulting would be McKinsey, and what are the other big names?
McKinsey, BCG, Bain, like the MBB, and then you have all other consulting firms. Like we have Kearney, Strategy, and A&M, and depending on the size of the firms, they take the numbers accordingly. So McKinsey is a bigger firm, so McKinsey hires a lot more.
Okay, interesting. And what do you think of the current recruiting environment? Because based on the numbers you're talking about, it's almost sounding like it's been status quo at Darden. But what I've been hearing from some other students is that it's not a good market. I
think the market overall hasn't been that easy. And I've heard that not just like, I've not just seen that like with recruitment. Again, like when we look at Darden's previous year, like it was slightly more easier for people to get into like the other consulting firms. Like if you bar MBB, which are like the big recruiters at Darden, I think a lot of other firms have cut down on their hiring completely because of the market. So I think the market is definitely challenging, no denying on that note. I've spoken to people at different schools, my friends who are at different schools, and they've had a much more tougher time than what I've seen here at Darden. But regardless of all of that, like I think, if you bar consulting options, like people have done really well with like, getting into like startups, general management, internship programs. And there is, at least by now, I'm seeing a lot of people who didn't have a consulting internship and who wanted a consulting internship. Now at least they have like an internship, and a lot of people are getting internships now in this specific month.
Do you know if startups are willing to recruit international students for full-time jobs?
I think as an international student, one of the biggest challenges you'd face is sponsorship. And for full-time jobs, generally with startups, it's pretty hard.
Okay.
if
Yeah,
you're an
that's
intern.
what I thought as well. Just wanted to validate my understanding.
But for internships, so Darden has they call it the Baton Ventures internship program, and they are able to actually get startups from across the country, like Darden connections, to recruit from the Darden network itself.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
So
And are these paid internships?
these are paid internships.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That's cool.
Yeah. And it's they also have something called the Baton specifically as a fund. So if you're going to startup, and if the internship compensation isn't as per what they think is up to the industry norms for an MBA, they would fund the remaining.
Okay, that's amazing. That's really helpful.
Compensate for the remaining pay. They just want more people to go to entrepreneurship.
Okay, that's interesting. And Giriraj, I also want to be mindful of time, and we've already exceeded our allotted time. Just one final question. What's one question you wish I had asked, and what's your answer?
Oh, that's actually tough. Wow, I have no clue right now. I wish you had asked me what should students or potential applicants think about before they're planning for their applications. And my answer is really know why you're doing it. It's because once you're in it, you do not want to have second thoughts. And these are, even though you can be at some of the best schools, there's a lot, it demands a lot from you. So think through it before you commit to it.
Okay. Wonderful. I love the advice. And Giriraj, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much. I really appreciate how you were on campus as well. So our viewers have an experience for campus.
Yes, this is the Darden campus right now, sitting in the Saunders Hall. Pretty nice campus, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Giriraj.
Thank you so much for having me here, Nupur.